Hey guys, welcome to the latest episode of the Lion and Liverbird podcast. Since it's the international break, we decided to do something a little different. We wanted to talk about Liverpool and how they're flying high in the Premier League, top of the table. And while a lot of credit has been given to Arne Slot and him, taking over a team that was really built by Jurgen Klopp, and it's a very young team. Uh, a person that doesn't get enough credit at sometimes is Michael Edwards. He is the current chief executive of Liverpool. I think he has a bigger role at FSG, and this is his second stint at the club. He was first here from 2016 to 2022. And he is often given a bit of credit for us winning the league and also the Champions League during the Jurgen Klopp years. He was the sporting director then, and a lot of the decisions were taken by him, especially when it came to signing players. And this was part of the restructuring of the team by the FSG group. But Michael Edwards isn't just somebody who's been in the limelight because of his time at Liverpool. There's a lot of history behind him, and he surely is one of the most smartest people in the world of football. Uh, Rohit's got a lot more about this. So, Rohit, please take it away. Michael Edwards, Liverpool, an excellent pairing.
Yeah. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about just off the bat is you use the word limelight, right? I would argue that there isn't enough limelight on Michael Edwards, right? Because while researching for this episode, I obviously tried looking at Wikipedia, and his Wikipedia page has barely anything
Nothing in it.
for
Yeah, I
his
know.
outsized contributions to the game and to Liverpool, right? The other interesting thing to me is for Michael Edwards' perspective is he doesn't like to take a lot of the limelight himself as well, which has been very well documented. So you have this kind of shadowy figure who likes to stay away from the limelight, but he's been so pivotal. So let's kind of start off with Michael Edwards' background, right? So he used to be a player, back in the day when he was young, but he never made it big. He got to about the reserves level for a League One side called Peterborough United. So he does have the background of being a player at whatever level, so he understands some of what it takes to be a player, some of what goes on in a changing room, in a dressing room, what it means to win. Basically, somebody who loves football and who's also been in the professional setup, right? But obviously, he wasn't a great player, so he kind of moved on. His career wasn't going anywhere, and he went to college and got a degree. And it's very interesting what degree he got. He got a degree in business management and informatics from University of Sheffield. So very interesting shift from soccer to data and business, managing a business and information and so on and so forth, right? So this kind of gives you a very interesting idea of the person who he'll become, right? His love for football being at the core of it, but then his technical competency being in management, data analytics, and so on and so forth, right? Uh, After that, he obviously started a job, a normal job. Like, he got a job teaching IT at a college, local college, right? But of course, he wasn't interested in it because, of course, teaching can be a pretty fulfilling profession, but it's nowhere as fulfilling as, managing a football club or being a footballer, right? So it's interesting. He was obviously not very happy at that job, and a lot of serendipitous things happened at the same time, right? And this was in 2003. Another thing I wanted to talk about is a lot of this information initially I got from this book called Expected Goals. So please check it out if anybody is interested. It is full of these very interesting anecdotes, right? So we are going back all the way to 2003 now, right? He's working as an IT teacher. And at the same time, there's this company called Prozone. I think, Adim, you are aware of this company, right? A lot of the people
Yeah,
who
yeah.
followed EPL for ages
It is.
would
Yep,
be
yep.
aware of Prozone. I actually didn't remember too much about Prozone. What do you remember about Prozone from that time?
I think it was mostly about the video parts that you used to see between the
Yeah.
matches and all that. These were clips that were shown in between matches, or at least
Yep.
during the review shows. It wasn't
Mhm.
as in depth as it is now, but it was.
Yeah.
It used to give you an insight about certain things and facets of the game that we wouldn't see at that time.
Yep. So the pros on the company itself is very fascinating. But in 2003, they basically started gathering all this video data for the matches and offering, analysis of that video as a service to various clubs, right? And one of the clubs that took it up, interestingly, is Portsmouth and the legendary Harry Redknapp, right? And they were looking for people who have some sort of football background, but who are also good with data and analysis at a much more rudimentary level than now. And of course, Michael Edwards happened to get a job in Prozone, and he got assigned to Portsmouth, and he started working for Harry Redknapp. There are many funny anecdotes from that. People say that there was one instance where Harry Redknapp asked Michael Edwards what his simulations said whether Portsmouth would win, and Michael Edwards said yes, but Portsmouth lost. And then Harry Redknapp came back and said, "Okay, next time we'll make your computer play the opposition's computer, not any players." So there was a lot of kind of funny things going on. But behind the scene, Harry Redknapp basically realized the potential and the skills for this guy because he was helping Portsmouth, right? He was helping Portsmouth steadily improve. And this was a guy who is not just a data crunching geek, but like I said earlier, he understands what it means to be a part of a soccer team, a football team, right? So he's not just coming with his presentation PowerPoint and reading through it, right? He's understanding how to engage the players better, how to get his point across. And he, through his analysis and help in these matches, helps Portsmouth improve. And Portsmouth actually won the FA Cup in 2008. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure he had a pretty prominent role, but behind the scenes, again, we didn't know about that, right? Uh, Interestingly, data kept getting picked up after that. And one of the funny things that I found was one of the big evangelists for using data and analysis in those initial days was Sam Allardyce.
Wow.
Right. And when you think about it, you associate Sam Allardyce's football as being very archaic, very old age kind of
One-dimensional,
football,
it's
right?
just, pass the ball
Exactly.
forward and hope.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, or that kind of kick it forward and route one football was based on data because apparently he was doing this data analysis in the background and he realized with his players, the best play to play is that way, right? Get the ball as far away from your goal as possible, as close to the opposition's goal, and get these big guys to win headers and score goals. And they did quite well, right? It's very interesting how some of these characters are kind of misportrayed based on the things that we see on the outside. And because of Sam Allardyce and him being an evangelist of, use data and, get Prozone into your teams, a lot of these teams around, started getting Prozone and all these experts or data analysts that came with Prozone. And of course, data analysis became a pretty big thing. What happened after that was interesting. Harry Redknapp's career progressed, right? Because he did well with Portsmouth and whatever strategies, tactics he was using there, it was working. Tottenham came calling. Tottenham was not as big, or no, they were not doing as well as they have been the last, 8 to 10 years. They
Still
were
the
kind of
same, bro.
struggling.
They're still the
Yeah,
same
but they were
with
struggling
Spurs.
even more. Good point. They were struggling even more back then, right? And they saw, hey, there's this guy, Harry Redknapp. He's done well with Portsmouth. Let's, try and get him in. And Harry Redknapp, of course, took Michael Edwards with him because he knew his value, because he knew, the kind of data and analysis and insights that Michael Edwards was providing. So he went to Tottenham and in 2000, and I think 9, and helped them get a top 4 finish. Again, not much is known about his work behind the scenes, but you can clearly see wherever he's going, the common thread is the team is improving, and it's improving through using of this data and analysis, and not just physically watching some player, but actually looking at micro events in the match. What happened after that is very, very interesting. I don't know how you feel about the FSG acquisition of Liverpool in 2011. Overall, of course, you should be happy about it, right? In the long run, things have been well. But what were your feelings back then in 2011 when FSG took
So
over Liverpool?
we were under George Gillett and Tom Hicks, and they had absolutely destroyed the club from the inside. I remember there was a lot of infighting with Rafa Benitez. He wanted to sign players, he couldn't get the players he wanted. We were selling assets. We sold Javier Mascherano, we sold Xabi Alonso for various reasons. And FSG came in and they basically, I remember the quote was, I think it was John Henry, and there's this clip of him in the newspaper with his arm up, and he's saying, "We're here to win." But we really didn't know what was going to happen. There was a lot of trepidation in the Liverpool fan forums. I remember on the Orkut days, we used to talk a lot about this. And we weren't really sure. what FSG actually is, because we were being handled by a set of Americans. We are going back into the hands of another set of Americans. And during this time, I believe, I don't quite remember, but I believe there was also talk of a Singaporean group wanting to buy us. Maybe there was talk of somebody from the UAE. I think, I don't remember. This is like a few years back. But we were a little skeptical about how this would be. And Liverpool were not the force they are now. Remember when I started supporting them back in the early
Yep.
2000s, uh, getting into the top four was a big deal for us. Like beating Manchester United or an Arsenal or even a Chelsea was a huge deal for us because it wasn't a regular occurrence. So the thing was that we knew it was going to be a long process to get to anywhere. Forget about winning the Premier League. I've often said on this podcast that I never thought we'd win the Premier League in my lifetime. But we were a little scared. The only positive that I got from a few people was that FSG were handling, I think they were still handling the Boston Red Sox. And the Red Sox were
Yeah, yeah.
and still are a pretty big team, although they have been decimated now due to some mismanagement again by FSG. But the Red Sox were a big team back then, and they were fighting the Yankees for world titles. And also, that was clearly a vision that I believe most Liverpool fans had for the club, but we did not know how long it would take. And yeah, so FSG also, given what they've done, yes, there is a lot of good they've done, but we all know that there's a lot of things that they can do a bit more better.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing there is the fact that FSG have that baseball connection, right?
Hmm.
And baseball and American sports in general, we've talked about this in this podcast, are much more mature in terms of using data and analytics. And that's where the connect with Michael Edwards and Liverpool happened, right? FSG took you guys over and they realized that, hey, there's not enough being done using data and analytics in this club, so let's do it. And let's try and hire the best people. And they looked around and they saw, hey, who are the clubs who are doing well and who are the people in those clubs who are talented? And they saw Tottenham with Michael Edwards there, and they basically poached him, right? And Michael Edwards initially, I think, joined as a performance analyst or head of performance analyst. And of course, he'd move on as a technical director in 2015, sporting director in 2016. And of course, he's the CEO now after having left for a bit in 2022. But FSG hiring Michael Edwards started what is a pretty glorious chapter in Liverpool's recent history, at least, right? So it's funny how these kind of dominoes fall and all these effects happen. Another interesting thing I wanted to talk about is when FSG poached Michael Edwards, right? Michael Edwards also convinced one of the folks who was working for him at Tottenham, called Dr. Ian Graham, to
Yeah.
join him as well. And Dr. Ian Graham is an interesting character because he is the one who developed a lot of these advanced models for telling, what a performance should be based on, what each action of a footballer in specific zones on the pitch counts for, right? Whether, a certain kind of pass is better than another kind of pass in a given situation, in a given position. So he's also going to be an interesting character in the team. And of course, Michael Edwards got to work, the thing that he does best, and analysis and data and things like that. And of course, recruitment was obviously a very big
Yeah.
part of it. And some very interesting things happened back then. Of course, a lot of the initial recruitment sometimes worked out, sometimes didn't work out. But a big issue was that your coach at that point of time, like Brendan Rodgers, right? He completely did not
Okay.
buy into this kind of technical director and this other people signing people for him, right? He
Yeah.
was the old school coach. He's the kind of coach who went out and said, get me this guy or get me that guy. And he expected the club to buy those players for him. He was not on board of, Michael Edwards as the technical director or sporting director saying, hey, we've crunched numbers and this guy seems like an underrated gem. Go for him, right? He did not like it. A very interesting example about that is Bobby Firmino,
Yeah.
Roberto Firmino, right? Firmino, you guys got for pretty cheap, right? And he was kind of underrated when you got him, right? And Firmino was a Michael Edwards signing, a Michael Edwards slash
So,
Ian Graham signing.
so
And yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so this is what I wanted to speak about Firmino, because you're talking about how Rogers did not like him and did not play him. I remember him coming from Hoffenheim, and I used to play FIFA a lot. I still do, and he was a pretty decent player in FIFA. But obviously, we did not know how great he would become for Liverpool. I think he's the best Brazilian that's ever played in the Premier League. Now, the funny thing I wanted to bring out is I think his debut was against Manchester United, and shockingly, he was played as a left winger at that game, or it was a right winger. It was one of the wings. and he cuts in and I think he scored a goal. I'm not quite sure, but it was a very strange position for him because, as we all know, he was either a cam or a striker. So it's strange seeing how Rodgers was using him, and I don't know how the what the plan was using him going forward because Rodgers was sacked pretty soon
So
after
that's
that.
that's the interesting thing, right? So
Yeah.
there was no plan. Rogers
Hmm.
didn't want Firmino. Rogers wanted Christian Benteke, and he got him, right? Because of course, managers
Oh
still
my
had a big pull
God.
back then, right?
That
And so
Benteke
Benteke,
signing.
obviously, exactly, it was a bad signing. He got
No,
sold
so
off in the next
I
year.
would argue that Benteke wasn't a bad signing. We just did not use him properly because he was at Aston Villa the season before and he was scoring goals for fun. He was this big target man, but he had great finishing ability. He had pace. I know he had an ACL injury at his time at Villa, but I thought that the Benteke signing was a good one. It's just that Rodgers didn't know how to use him. That's, I think, another big issue that we need to talk about. So Benteke wasn't a bad signing. I remember Benteke used to play under Klopp, right? And it was horrible watching him miss one-on-ones. Like the poor guy was absolutely out of confidence. He
Uh,
seemed like he seemed like he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I feel bad sometimes for such players because he gave it his all. It just didn't work out for him in the end at Liverpool.
Agreed. So, but basically, my point was Benteke did not suit the Liverpool
Yeah.
team.
Hmm.
And Firmino, at the end of it, was a better pick, right? And he was a Michael Edwards pick based on data and analytics. And the interesting story there is, Edwards loved Firmino so much that he named his dog Bobby, right? So he was so much in love with the player who kind of stands out, who's so underrated, right? And apart from Firmino, Michael Edwards was also instrumental in actually signing some players that were so critical for your
Yeah.
success. He signed Mane, he signed Andrew Robertson from Hull, and the two other people who are kind of the biggest superstars in the Liverpool ecosystem in the last decade, Klopp as well as Salah, right? It was Jan Graham's modeling that basically said that hire Jurgen Klopp over, I think, Carlo Ancelotti and Eddie Howe at that point of time,
Hmm.
right? So the fact that Klopp was there in the first place to take your team to those heights of success and achievements is because of Michael Edwards and this guy being Ian Graham being there.
So you know
I
pretty
want to
well,
talk about
right?
Andy Robertson,
Yeah,
right?
so I wanted to also
Go
talk about
ahead.
Salah. So Salah was not
Yeah.
our first choice when Klopp came in.
Yep. Yep.
Klopp
Yep.
wanted Julian
Right.
Brandt from Borussia Dortmund.
Yes.
And I don't
Yes.
know, the data models must have said that Salah was going to be a great signing because, frankly, in that period, right, from I think 2018 or 2017 onwards, it's very difficult to pinpoint one Liverpool signing that did not work for us. Like every
Mhm.
single player that came in did their job.
Mhm.
Salah, Firmino, Mane, Wijnaldum was there. Uh,
Yes.
Fabinho.
Excellent signings.
Yeah, Wijnaldum is unheralded. Like people don't talk about him
Yes.
enough, but he was great. And there were a lot of years after his signing that we still haven't been able to replace him properly. There was this joke between Liverpool fans that we don't know what Wijnaldum does. But his energy, his movement, his availability, and he
Yeah.
came from relegated Newcastle.
Yeah,
So
and that's the interesting thing, right? And you guys got all of these players who are underrated, and you didn't spend like a bomb on any of them,
mm,
right?
mm.
You spent some pretty reasonable amounts of money on all of these guys. For example, I think Andy Robertson, you guys got for like 8 million or something,
8
very
million
minimal
plus
from like Hull.
Kevin Stewart. I think it was Kevin
Okay,
Stewart. Yeah.
yeah,
So Kevin Stewart was
there you
an
go.
up and coming midfielder at that time. And
Mhm.
I remember when we made this swap deal, right? A lot of the fans were upset because we saw Kevin Stewart as someone who can possibly play for in the midfield for many years to
Mhm.
come. So he went to
Mhm.
Hull. Robbo came over here. 6 months, I think, Robbo did not start as a left back for us because that was James Miller taking up the position. But that was also because we wanted or Klopp wanted Robbo to understand how the game is played or how his team plays. But once he
Got
came, I think he could be one of the best signings we've had. As a left back, I think he's one of the best ever we've ever had. There's also another
yeah,
great signing in Joel Matip, who just retired
yep,
from football. He came
yep,
as a free signing from Schalke, and he won
yep.
everything with us. Again, another signing that doesn't get talked about enough. So we talk about uh, Michael Edwards and his team working so well to get players, and I think we should also give credit to them for the sales that they've pulled off from time to time.
Yes. We'll get to that, right? I
Mhm.
just wanted to make one point about your Salah over Julian Brandt thing, right?
Mhm.
It's very reminiscent of what we just talked about, the Firmino versus Benteke thing, right? But in this case, Klopp actually agreed that,
Yeah.
okay, I'll go with you guys. I'll go with your analysis. I want Julian Brandt, but let's go with Salah because you guys have clearly done your work. You guys have crunched the numbers and you're suggesting Salah. So that was, I think, very crucial as well, having a manager who's willing to work with these kind of technical folks in the technical roles. And then, yeah, let's talk about the sales, right? Because I think the sales obviously help balance the books out. Because one of the things I was seeing is in the 5 years leading up to you guys winning the Premier League, right? Your net spend was 92 million pounds, and Man City's net spend was 505 million pounds.
It's
And one of the
terrible.
things that kind of enabled that was Coutinho, right?
Yeah.
Being sold to Barcelona. So go ahead. You were going to say talk about the sales.
Yeah. So the Coutinho thing can be considered as one of the greatest deals we have ever done because with that money, we were able to bring in Allison, possibly the best Premier League goalkeeper right now, and Virgil van Dijk, who's possibly one of the greatest centre backs ever. And you're right. When Michael Edwards was there, and even right now, some of the sales that he's done is kind of incredible. So we got rid of players like Dominic Solanke, Jordan Ibe, for 20 million each. Now, Ibe was an up and coming star. A lot of people thought he was going to be better than Raheem Sterling. Unfortunately, things didn't work out for him, and Solanke is now at Tottenham. But at that time, getting 20 million each for both of them, that was kind of incredible. And then this summer also, we sold Bobby Clark, Sepp Vandenberg, and Fabio Carvalho. And I think three of them combined, we got 60 million, which is great because Clark is obviously someone we could have used, but he's a youngster. He's still learning the trade. I think he's at Salzburg right now. But Sepp Vandenberg, he's never played in the Premier League, but we got 20 million for him. He obviously did play in the Bundesliga. And there is also something that Michael Edwards has is that he has a very good connect with the RB group for some weird reason. So that is why we were able to sign players like Ibrahim Konate, Naby Keita, and Takumi Minamino without any other clubs actually being in the race. Konate, I think, is an underrated defender. I think he can actually become one of the
Yep.
best in the world. It's just that his injuries seem to plague him from time to time. Uh, Keita was the one player that I think most Liverpool fans believed was going to be a super hit. We all thought he's going to be our next Steven Gerrard. I remember Gerrard, even there's a photo of Gerrard handing his jersey, the number 8, to Keita. But I think that is the one player that really, really did not meet the expectation. I think he is what you would consider as a flop. Unfortunate with injuries mostly.
Yeah,
Minamino
it's
was
mostly
also
an injury thing, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
The Minamino one is one of the funniest incidents that I can talk about because I remember this happened. It was a Champions League season where Salzburg played Liverpool, and I remember the front three. There was a South Korean player, there was Minamino, and there was Erling Haaland, and they ran rings around the defense. Like it was crazy how good they were, right? And everybody was like, we were linked to a Red Bull Salzburg player, and everybody's like, it's Haaland. It has to be Haaland, or it has to be the South Korean guy because those are the players we need. We need a striker, or we need I think the South Korean guy was a right winger. And we're all talking about it. That's it, that's it, that's it. And we ended up signing Minamino. But even he has his legacy at Liverpool because I think one of the League Cups we won thanks to Minamino's goals in almost every round. So Minamino is
Yep.
also a decent enough player, I would say. But yeah, Keita is the one that really hurt. But coming back to the original point, sales have always been great at Liverpool. I don't think there's ever been one sale which we can say it's bad. The only issue from time to time is that we see players leave on a free. And that's where you miss out on at least a bit of amount. I know there's one name that you want to talk about over here. But
Yeah.
Wijnaldum is
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
example who left on a free when he shouldn't have.
Mhm.
So the other name obviously you wanted to bring up, so go ahead.
Yeah, before that, right? Let's just to round off that discussion about Michael Edwards being at the helm of so many signings who worked out so well as being able to sell all these players. It goes to show what a well-run club can function like, right? Instead of all these examples where we see Chelsea, Man United, where we don't have a good structure, we don't have somebody with knowledge, understanding of how a club should work at the top, and you see a scattergun approach. So that's I think Michael Edwards' biggest achievement, being able to run a club so smoothly on data. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think credit should also be given to FSG. because as soon as they came in, they wanted to set up a
Yeah.
structure. Like
Yeah,
this is how it's
agreed,
going to be. There's
agreed,
going to be
agreed,
a sporting director. There's going to be a
agreed,
technical head. There's going to be a transfer committee. The
agreed,
committee that
agreed.
most people didn't want. So
Yeah,
now
yeah,
it's even
agreed.
better for us because right now we don't have somebody as strong a character as Jurgen Klopp. We've got a coach.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
don't
yeah.
have a manager.
Yep,
We have a coach. So yeah,
yep. So I think yeah, so that's a very good point, of course, right? FSG put the structure in place and hired Michael Edwards, right? So that's definitely the thing. And then coming back to the fact that you lose some players on the free, right? That's interesting because Michael Edwards is also known to be very straightforward, very cutthroat, right? He does not kind of budge from certain ideals. For example, Emre Can, I think you guys lost him
yeah,
for
agreed.
zero, but he wanted to renew his contract and put a release clause in there. And Michael Edwards doesn't want to put release clauses in any of his players because that would mean him potentially losing out on money in the
Hmm.
future. And if there was a release clause, for example, on Coutinho for like 80 million pounds, you guys would not have gone, I don't know how much you got, 150 million pounds for him or
142.
something.
Yeah, 140
Yeah,
million.
exactly. So that's the kind of story there, right? It has to be a balance between kind of not compromising on certain aspects because maybe you lost on a little bit of money with Emre Can and whoever else, but in the long run, you've made a lot more money
It's
because of
about the
having this kind of
principle.
vision.
It's the principle.
Exactly. The right kind of principle, right, of managing a club, so to speak. And now coming to his current role, right? Of course, in 2022, he left, right? Essentially, he wanted a newer challenge. He wanted a bigger challenge, and there were some murmurs that Klopp did not like
Yeah,
being overruled because he had gotten this cult status, right? One example is I think you guys signing your Uruguayan striker,
Darwin Nunes.
essentially. Yeah, Darwin Nunes. Essentially, I think the data and analytics team said that he's a good striker, but for him to work at Liverpool, you have to change the entire system and structure because he's not the Firmino kind of striker. He's a very different striker. So I think there probably were some kind of disagreements in the background, and this guy did not feel like he was being challenged enough, so he left in 2022. And then, of course, after Klopp left, it was interesting. People were trying to figure out who is going to take over the reins of the club. And when you guys signed Michael Edwards, I knew that you guys were set to sign or the correct manager in the future because you know what this guy is like. You know his decision making has been top notch over almost a decade, and so you're set up for success. And now of course, you guys have signed Richard Hughes as sporting director to work under Michael Edwards, and you obviously have Slot. And the interesting thing about that is, we were crying and you were crying and moaning about Liverpool not signing any players, right? But you guys are top of the league. That can only mean, you guys have signed the right coach, for example, as well as you have the right people in charge. So, Michael Edwards is invaluable for your team, right? So, what do you have to say about this kind of chapter, this current chapter of Michael Edwards now?
Yeah. So regarding the team, Slot's been quite frank in saying that he's been really privileged to take over Liverpool and the squad because Jurgen Klopp had got quite a few youngsters in the season before. Dominic
Hmm.
Szoboszlai coming in and quite a few other players to help out. So we have a very good team that can become even better. Now, I did want to talk about the summer. There were a lot of Liverpool fans who were unhappy with how the summer went because we had that long protracted case of Zubomendi wanting to come, and then last second he says, "No, I love the mountains and I don't want to leave." And then we signed Chiesa and Mamadashvili. Did we need a goalkeeper? Maybe, given how Allison keeps getting injured doing these Trivela clearances. But the rest of the thing, Slot coming in, the way the team plays, uh, and the players themselves look happy. Like a lot of players have come out and said that they actually enjoy training sessions now. Maybe it was the right time for Jurgen Klopp to leave and get a fresh face in. But you rightly said that getting the right face in is also going to be a daunting task to replace somebody like
Yep.
a Jurgen Klopp. We've seen that happen at
Yep.
Manchester United. So there must have been
Yeah. Again and again.
a long drawn process to find who the right man is. And it's weird because as soon as Slot came in, he is not Jurgen Klopp. He's not gonna be a Jurgen Klopp. He's
Mhm.
not that kind of character. He's very frank to the point. But the way we play, it's basically, I said this previously also, it's basically just a few changes here and there. There isn't a drastic overhaul. I remember we were linked with Ruben Amorim from Sporting. I think it was Sporting or Porto, I'm not quite sure. And the issue was that he plays with the
Voting.
back three. Yeah. He plays with the back three.
Yep.
That's a complete overhaul of our system. And we will probably have to
Yeah.
sell players, buy players, and that's another huge cost I don't think FSG wanted to take up. So we bought in someone who
Yep.
fits the system, who is not somebody who wants complete control of the club. He knows that there is a structure in place. And so far, that's what
Yeah.
it's worked out really good for us. So yeah,
Mhm.
all good so far from Slot.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, the saying that comes to mind in terms of that is, if it's not broke, don't try to fix it, right? If it's not
Yeah.
broken, don't try to fix it. You have a system that works. Why would you go out and hire a manager that needs to break up the entire system, buy a whole bunch of players? And so that again goes to show, the decision making of Michael Edwards and his acumen in the sporting world. I wanted to end the podcast with something slightly different, right? A very heartwarming story about the kind of person Michael Edwards is. Of course, we've talked about the fact that he's averse to media exposure. He doesn't give any interviews and so on and so forth. But there was a story I read about Harry Redknapp, right? Of course, Harry Redknapp has retired. And then, one of the fans he got to know was on his deathbed, right? He was kind of course, not doing well, and he was a big football fan. He wanted to meet with Harry Redknapp, so Harry Redknapp went to the hospital and met this fan, and it turned out that that fan was a big Liverpool fan, and he'd never been to the stadium, right? So Harry Redknapp called Michael Edwards, and Harry Redknapp didn't think that Michael Edwards would, pick up his call because Harry Redknapp had retired. Michael Edwards is the technical director of Liverpool. He's a big guy and a busy guy. Not only did Edwards pick up Harry Redknapp's call, he arranged a special tour for this person. This fan whose last wish was to go to Liverpool, and made sure that the last wish of the fan was fulfilled. So that goes to show that, not only is he a good technical director or a CEO, he's also a good human being, right? So that was a very interesting story I figured out, because we always hear about stories in football and the world in general of people, being rude, people being cutthroat. But here's somebody who is cutthroat in certain sense, but also is a good human being. And I think you guys are set up for the future in, very, very secure hands.
Yeah, yeah. So with that, I think we'll end this week's podcast. Do like, share, and subscribe to our content. We'll be back before the weekend to preview week 8 of the Premier League, where we've got a very big Liverpool Chelsea clash. That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
And so until then, take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.